Hi everybody, welcome to a special opportunity that we've got for you today. I am joined by Mr. Rick Zollman, who is a longtime custodian at Scott2ube Elementary School and a longtime historian of Scott2ube Elementary School. So we're going to have a conversation today just to kind of preserve all of those memories on the eve of your retirement. Mr. Zollman, congratulations on the retirement.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And what brings us here today?
Well, Mr. Marshall, the principal at SES, he asked me, he saw me one day talking to the history club, and he said, Rick, the things you know and you're telling and this tour you're giving is going to be forgotten if we don't try to save it. And I told him, I said, well, me and Mr. Carter and perhaps Dave Wells would be the only other two that could give you a good tour of what it used to be like. And he's asked me to come in and do this, and he's asked me a dozen times, and I told him, I said, yeah, I'll do it. So here we are. Just
give us a little bit of background here as we get started. How long have you worked at SES? What does that look like?
I've been there a little over 35 years. All at one school, never transferred anywhere. It's all been, and of course I also attended SES when I was a little fellow.
Really?
So I've got a lot of history at SES.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, I'm excited. Yeah. So how far back do we want to start? Where do you want to go?
Actually, we're going back of course, it used to be, some people call it Highland Street. The actual name is Scott2ube Elementary. It's etched in stone up above, but it did for a while get the name Highland Elementary because of Highland Street.
Okay.
But I'm even going back before that because a lot of people don't realize this.
Okay.
Where did the kids in the city go before Highland? By the way, Highland Elementary was 1937.
Okay.
That's the first year they went into the building, was 1937. Before 1937, a lot of people don't realize where the city kids went because there was no building there. They went, this is from memory, and I do remember the building before they tore it down, so let me straighten that out before we start. I didn't attend there. It would have been on the corner of Cherry and Meridian Street, okay, which if you're familiar, that's the Catholic Church. It's set parallel to Meridian Street. There's a big, long, skinny building right there, and that's where the city kids went. And the Catholic Church was there. It was the old Catholic Church, but it was also, they shared that block. Okay. They shared that block. That's where you went before 1937. Now, I do remember when they tore that building down. I lived on Cherry Street when I was a little rascal, and we'd ride our bike. I remember riding our bikes up there and watching them demolish the building. And but that was before Highland Elementary or Scott2ube Elementary. You went to elementary school there if you lived in the city. Of course, Lexington was already here.
Yes.
And so now we're going to start on 1937.
Okay.
It was the three-story part is all you had, which if you're looking at the front of the building, it says that at the top, Scott2ube Elementary School in 1937. It was 3 stories. That was the original building. Of course, it's been built on twice since then, major add-ons since then.
Now those would be the wings
the
wing. Off the side, okay.
First of all came, if you're facing the building, the one to the south or to the right was the first grade wing. And I did attend there the very first year they opened those rooms. That's when I went to school. It was 1960.
Okay.
That was like the opening up of the wings, and they were state of the art. You had a water fountain in each classroom. You had a boys and a girls restroom. You had 2 sinks, and I mean we thought it was really state of the art at that time. You know, no air conditioning, and of course it was connected to the building, but only by a canopy. And in the first grade wing, there was two wings, a short one and a longer one, and there was a canopy down the middle of it. It wasn't heated or anything. I mean, you were actually outside. We called it the breezeway for years because the breeze always blew through there. It was just okay. And I know if you got in trouble in school, in class, really got in trouble, of course, your teacher now would put you out in the hallway. Well, they put you in the breezeway. Of course, if it was cold weather, they stuck your toboggan on you and your hat and your gloves. That would have been cruel and unusual punishment now, probably. But you had to stand out in the breezeway with your coat and hat and gloves on. That was if you couldn't behave in class.
Now, do you know this from personal experience? Or is this just you saw some kids that did that?
I always waited until summer.
Okay.
It was summer. It was nice in the summer. But that was 1960. And like I said, I went there, and at that time, that was the first year it opened up. Then, when I was in the 6th grade, they would not be able to do this now. Probably it would be discrimination. The school was overloaded. The school become so. What they did to take care of the overflow, they sent kids to the Armory down on South Main Street. They sent all the 6th graders down there that were non-band kids.
Oh.
So now somebody's mother would say, well, that's discriminating against my son because he's not in the band. I still walked to Highland Street every morning, caught the bus out in front. They took us to the Armory. They dropped us off at 3 o'clock. They dropped you back off in front of the Armory. We ate lunch at the middle school. They bused us to the the old middle school, the old cafeteria now that where the tennis courts is and all that. That's where we ate lunch. And they bused us there. So we spent the biggest part of the day on a bus, really. But we actually were, the non-band kids went to the Armory.
You mentioned being 1st grade, so there's no kindergarten at this time?
At that time, there was no kindergarten at all.
So it's 1st to 6th grader in that building? Okay.
Yes, that was 1 through 6, because there was no kindergarten. If you went to kindergarten, usually you went to one of the churches.
Okay.
Baptist church up the road had one. The Presbyterian church had one on the corner there, and you went to kindergarten there.
Okay.
Then after we went to the Armory, we then went to the middle school, which now is where around Meyer Gym there. That was considered the middle school, and we went 3 years there, and then we came over to the new building here.
So that was 7 through 9 then.
Yes.
Over at the old middle school. Okay.
Yes. Now a little back to the old school, the way it used to look. Years ago, there was a fire escape attached to the side of the building. More people ask me about that than anything, the old fire escape. And it was a round cylinder thing with a slide in it, circular slide. It just went down like a water park now.
Okay.
And it was only one classroom used it. It was the top floor, Mr. Napier, as a teacher. And he would put the biggest boy in the class right there by those doors, because it was right underneath the chalkboard, and the doors were only about 3 feet tall. So and there was a bar above it. Well, that boy grabbed that bar, kicked the doors open, and then Mr. Napier gave him the lowdown on it. You go down and hold your feet out and hit the doors on the outside.
Okay.
And you came out, and they would lock back. When he hit those doors, they sprung back and stayed back. And he told him, said, all the other kids are coming down right behind you, so don't loaf around, go on out. So that was quite a thrill at that time to get. And I know we'd all be outside during the fire drill and think, God, those lucky ducks got to use the fire escape.
So they actually did that every time there was a fire.
Every time
I might actually enjoy fire drills if you get to do something like that.
Every time you had a fire drill, that was the only class, because I was like, boy, I wish I could be in Mr. Napier's class and try out the fire thing, And it's funny, when they were remodeling the second time in '86, me and Bobby Miles and Todd Stark were at the school, and the construction guys come and said, would you guys want to take one more trip down that before we take it off and tear it down? So we all said, yeah. So me and Bobby and Todd went down, then they tore it down.
Yeah.
That was the last ride down the fire escape.
So a little older than what you would have originally did, but you still got to take the ride.
That was kind of like a bucket list thing for me. And but the old fire escape, and as you come out those cafeteria doors on the north side, by the library now, the library's there, you were outside. That was actually all playground. It was a monstrous playground. It was a great big playground. And the fire extinguisher was right there on the left. As soon as you come down the stairs, you could see it sitting right there. And then you just went out on the playground. But
Hey, you say a monstrous playground. Was there still playground equipment and that sort of stuff?
We had a softball field. We had 4 big full-court basketball courts. We had a boys and a girls softball field. And then you had all the playground equipment that's there now and more.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of the playground equipment. And out behind the building, there was a smaller playground that you go when you're young, you look at things. You had to be in the 3rd grade to cross the line and get to the big playground. So we were in the 2nd grade. You'd stand there. It was a sidewalk was the line. And you'd stand there looking over at all the big kids, God, I can't wait till I can get over the sidewalk,
Oh, yeah.
But you had little pee-wee playground equipment over here, and you couldn't wait to get over on the big one.
Yeah.
And it's like I say, just how you look at things, And but I remember when I come back to work for the school, I hadn't been in Highland for years. This would have been in probably '84 or '85. The cafeteria seemed so small. Because I remember when I was a kid, it was like you was going in the Yum Center. It seemed so huge to you. And I went in and out of woo, it's just, it's how you look at things different. But then in 85, 85, they started on the two north wings, which are now the second grade and the third and fourth, the library and the art room. And they were actually there. It was Park Gold Construction. They were there for 3 years building it.
Wow.
So it was a big project. And
just things had gotten full, and so you just needed the additional space?
Well, we had 6th grade at the middle school, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And they wanted to bring them back. Of course, we only brought them back for a short time. We run into the same thing. We had to take them back, because we were still overcrowded. But now, in between all those times there, I'll tell you a couple of interesting stories that probably a lot of people have never heard. I'm sure the heavyweight champion of the world, the one that sticks in our mind is Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
He was the most famous one. The second one probably was Joe Louis.
Yes.
Joe Louis was a great champ. Yes. A huge guy, and was champ from 1937 to 1949. He was the heavyweight champion of the world. And at one time, that was the most prestigious you could have in sports. You could be the NBA champs or the Super Bowl champs, but if you were the heavyweight champion of the world, that was the biggest title you could hold. Because they always said that Muhammad Ali was voted the most recognized person on the earth when he was heavyweight champion of the world. He was at Highland Elementary. Joe Louis was.
Really?
When he was champ. He was champ when he was there. He sat on the stage. I used to have an old picture of it, and I wish I still did. But my dad was a big boxing fan, and he went and seen him. And he said you walked up on one side, and you shook hands with him, and you went down on the other side. And because Dad always told me, he said, I never will forget how big his hands were. He said, I shook hands with him, and he just swallowed my hand with his, and he shook my hand. He said, I never will forget the size of it. He said, if he'd have made a fist, he'd have plastered your whole face with one blow. His fist was like that. And but that was
just for an evening talk, or what?
Well, I'll tell you how it all happened. John Lisby, a previous sheriff, his dad's name was Fred.
Okay.
And years ago, and it's still this way somewhat, when you traded governors, you got a lot of things with that. You appointed the person over the license branch. You appointed the person over the state highway. You got a lot of pull when you were governor. And Fred, John's dad, had worked hard to get him reelected, and he'd run out of positions to pass out. So it made Fred the Indiana State Boxing Commissioner.
Oh, okay.
And at that time, and this is also hard to believe, but now Joe Louis had a training camp in French Lick.
Okay.
Of course, French Lick used to really be the big time. It was a lot of things. They had the 2 big motels. French Lick was a booming town, and he had a training camp in French Lick.
Okay.
Well, Fred was kind of looking for something to do as the new boxing commissioner, so he drove over to French Lick and picked up the champ, picked up Joe Louis, and brought him back to where he was from, to Scottsburg. And at that time, Highland Street Elementary, or Scottsburg Elementary, was the biggest building in town. That was the biggest room in town, the cafeteria was. So he brought him there, and Dad said he just had a chair setting up on the middle of the stage, and he'd talk to you, and then, of course, autographs weren't a big thing back then. Dad said you shook hands with him, and he'd ask you what your name was, and say, I'm Ray, how are you, and shook his hand and stuff, and then you just went down the other side. And Dad said a lot of people turned out to see him because he was the heavyweight champion of the world. And which is kind of an interesting story.
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate you saying a lot of people don't realize how important the heavyweight champ was.
Oh, no.
That was the baddest man on the planet.
Yeah.
And, we don't think about that as much today. There's so many other things, like you said.
Well, like right now, if I ask you who's the heavyweight champion of the world, I wouldn't even know. And I'm a boxing fan, too. I wouldn't even know his name. What the UFC with a kick, that is kind of to me, Don King ruined boxing. But Joe was there, and he was the man. I mean, he was very well beloved.
Well, I had never heard Joe Louis sitting right on the same stage.
Same stage, oh yes. Actually, when they remodeled, if you go to Highland Street and you look at the stage, because the construction people are the one that talked them out of doing it, they were going to tear all that vine work around the stage. It circles the stage and outlines the stage. And that guy come in there, and he told him, he said, I hate to tear this out, because he said, I hope you realize this was all done by hand.
Yeah.
And it's in the plaster. it looks like vines and flowers going up all around and around the top.
Yeah.
He said, if I was you all, I would not tear this out, because he said this was done by hand and you'd never get it replaced. And he said, I would leave it. He said, we can clean it up and leave it. So they left it, and it's really nice. Yeah, that's something a lot of people don't realize, that Big Joe was here.
Yeah.
And like I say, that was the most prestigious thing there was. But, now, another little history about Scottsburg that a lot of people don't realize, because I hate to keep saying this, but I remember this.
Well, that's why you're here, Rick, because you remember this stuff. So.
We lived on Keith Street, which is just a block over from Highland, and me and my brother walked to school. We just walked. We lived out the end of Keith Street. So we were close there. And it was in the early 60s. We were all playing out in the yard, and Dad was with us. We heard this big boom, and the Baptist church burned down. The fuel oil furnace blew up, is what the boom was. And I remember, Dad, we got in the truck, and we drove over there, and at that time we were by the old water tower there out of the way. And the steeple actually fell down through itself. I mean, it just burned terribly bad, the whole church.
And that's the location where the First Baptist Church is today.
That's where they are now. And the original church stands there, but they redid it all. But it was virtually gone. You know, the flames were coming out through the roof and everything. But the connection there is, when that burned, they had nowhere to go. So they held church in Scottsburg.
Oh, okay.
For like a couple years. They had every Sunday morning, they met in the cafeteria at Scottsburg Elementary and had their church there. Later on in the 80s, when I was there, it was the easiest overtime I ever got. On Sunday mornings, I went to school because the Church of the Latter-day Saints held services there for about a year.
Okay.
Of course, now they're down here south of town.
Yeah.
But the school let them, they came and said, could we use the school? And they used the school for the Latter-day Saints also. But I was trying to think of anything else I had. Have you got any more questions about Scottsburg Elementary? I covered Joe Lewis and the church.
So when you got there, what were your responsibilities? What were you doing when you first started?
Well, when I first started, Todd Stark was there, and I was night shift.
Okay.
Todd had seniority on me, and I worked till 9 o'clock at night. And then I did that for 3 years, and then Todd went on to the maintenance department, and I took day shift.
Okay.
And that's how I got day shift. Another thing I wanted to cover that I'd forgotten about, in the late 30s, early 40s, they had basketball, little boy, and of course, used to back then, and nothing against Mr. Rao and everybody now, the principal done a lot of stuff that he doesn't do now. I mean, he coached all the little basketball teams.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You saw your principal a lot. Then in the summer, Mr. Huff and Mr. Carter did the Farm League, what we used to call Farm League, pre-Little League, you know.
Oh, okay.
So you see those, they were very close to you because you see them year round.
Yeah.
They were your principal, they were your coach, they were your baseball coach in the summer. And so you really got to know your principal. They call the Highland Braves now, is what they call the basketball team. But I should have brought it with me. I've got an old picture. Actually, Janice has it. Her dad's in the picture. They were the Highland Bulldogs.
Okay.
Which I thought was a story that little guys playing ball might now appreciate now.
Yeah.
In the old picture, it's got the cheerleaders and the players, and they had an old bulldog on wheels, like a little cart, and they rolled him out in front of the picture and said Highland Bulldogs on the little bulldogs down in front of the picture. And that's getting the picture made. And of course, back then, there were no uniforms. You didn't have basketball uniforms. Your mother bought you a pair of shorts. And you took what we would call now a wife beater t-shirt, just an old white undershirt, and your dad took a magic marker and put your number on it.
Okay.
And so it looked, all of them were sitting there with those, dorky looking uniforms on and a number drawn by hand by their dad on the shirt, and that was the uniforms. But that's all we had. We didn't, nobody gave it any thought because everybody had the same stuff, and it wasn't what his is, different than mine, and then it was a simpler time.
That was one of the things I enjoyed. I got to talk to Coach Gina, but she was retiring, and she talked about in those early days having her girls go pick up corn cobs out of fields, and that was the way they paid for their. Today we think, oh well, if I don't have my 3 pairs of Nike shoes or things like that, but not all that long ago, your dad and a magic marker.
Yeah, they took a black marker and they give you. Mine was 8, and we even did that when I was in school, which in the '60s, and I had an 8. on the old undershirt there. You know, you tried to do it as nice as you could,
Yeah.
but you did it in a magic marker. And then, like I say, most of the time your principal coached you, and like I say, and really that was a good thing because you got a good relationship with your principal. You know, you felt like you were friends. But yeah, I will say, Mr. Carter and Mr. Huff were good about keeping that line there. You know, they were friendly and nice to you, but they kept the line where, you know, they weren't really your friend, is what I'm saying, but they kept the line there. And that was good old days. It was simple times.
Now, when you're doing that in the 80s, Lexington's here, Vienna's still there,
Yeah.
Johnson. So are they playing each other still? Is that
Yes.
kind of what?
Yes, that's what we did back then.
Okay.
Now, a little bit more back on Scott2ube Elementary. See, in the 80s there, it probably started in the late 70s. They did Lexington first. They remodeled Lexington, big project. Then they come up and did Vienna, and then they did Scott2ube Elementary. And then, of course, Johnson was done not too long ago.
Yeah.
I remember when I told you I was in the 6th grade and I went to the Armory, the only thing we could do, we had a blacktop lot out back, that was all. No equipment, no playground equipment at all. So everybody played softball, or else you watched. And the big thing was to make Mr. Napier was your coach, was to make the traveling team, the big softball traveling team. And I made the big traveling team. And you went around and played everybody. Because I never will forget going to Finley. At that time, there was an elementary school in Finley, which, you know, came into Vienna. They made it Vienna.
Oh, so there was actually another one.
Oh, yes, there was an old. It was the people that owned it actually just kind of gave it to the school to use as long as you want the property.
Okay.
Then it said if you stop using it, the property comes back to us. Well, the building was there, and they were having to pay taxes on the school building, so they tore it down.
Okay.
And it's right there in Finley. Before you go down the hill, you can see where the school lay there.
So before you go, like down to the old bridge, or
Yes.
covered bridge.
Go to the left, and I think the church now has a shelter house there, and
Okay.
you can actually see the big concrete slab of where the school used to be.
Really?
It's like remaining is the concrete slab. But and we would go to Johnson and play Johnson. We went out to Lexington and played. Then we had a traveling softball team, and then they would come to the Armory and play us. You know, it was just 6th grade only. I never will forget at Finley. If you hit it pretty far in left field, it went downhill, you know, real quick.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, if I could get that down over that hill, it's going to roll clear downtown, and I'm a home run. So I kept working, and I finally got it past the left fielder there, and it rolled down the hill, and I got a home run.
There you go.
But if it had been level ground, I'd probably got a double, maybe at the most. But when I got it rolling downhill, I got a home run out of it. So.
So you mentioned a couple of projects there at Scott2ube Elementary. So you get there in 85. They're doing the north wing. So was there another one that connected everything then?
Well, I was there if I remember the first day the people come. They what they actually did was started on the 1st grade side.
Okay.
They tore the old canopy out. That's what you like was the breezeway, and they redid all those rooms. Well, they did the 1st grade. Let me take that back. They did the 1st grade, and then they moved everybody. Everybody was in that part.
Okay. So everybody moves to the south.
Everybody moved to the south, and they built the 2 wings.
Okay.
Coming out, we got those completely done, and we moved as far north as we could go.
Okay.
Then they started on the cafeteria and the gym and the old 3-story part,
Okay.
and that's how they finished. But I know because we had no library, we didn't have any art room because those were classrooms. It took all those rooms to get everybody in it on the north side. There was a lot of plastic put up to keep you away from, and keep
Sure.
dust away from it, and keep you away from the construction. We even had the cafeteria kind of divided off where we could eat over on this half, and they were working in this half, and it was kind of a step or phase thing.
So is there anything, obviously, as a caretaker of the building for so many years, is there anything, you know, any places in there people would be shocked to see? You know, I'm not saying secret passages or rooms, but that's kind of
about anything.
no, I just ask. I figure if anybody's going to know, it's going to be you. So,
well, like now when I go somewhere, like I went to Scott's Hardware the other day, and there was 3 or 4 boys working there that went to Highland Elementary.
Yeah.
When it's Rick, we were just talking about you in the school. Said it's Freddie's hole still there.
okay.
And I said, you guys, Freddie's hole will probably always be there, unless they level it all. And that one boy was getting ready to get married. He said, I'd like to see that again. He said, it's been a long time since I've been. But I said, you don't want to have your wedding reception or get married in Freddie's home. I said, get over that. I said, it's a dirt floor. And I said, and your fiance would have a fit if you took her down there and said, here's where we're going to do this at. You probably wouldn't be getting married, I told him. But it lays underneath the cafeteria, and it runs the full length of the cafeteria. There's 5, and they're about as wide as the room we're in right now.
Okay.
And there's 5 of them. And there's holes to connect them just about this high that actually looks like they were busted in there with a sledgehammer or a jackhammer. It's a real rough cut entrances that go there. The only one we ever used was the first one you went in because it had a door to it. And because if you'd done the others, you would have had to drive it through those holes or bust out bigger holes. And it was all dirt. The entire place was dirt. And about 15, 20 years ago, we put a wood floor in about half of it.
Okay.
So because otherwise it was damp and dusty. They couldn't store anything that was worth any value down there because it was dusty and dirty. And it made a nice storeroom. But a lot of kids still ask me to this day about all the old things. I said, no, boys, nothing happened in Freddie's hole. No little kids were kidnapped or anything. That is all no good.
Okay.
It's just a dirty old storeroom is all it is. But I thought maybe that's what you were hinting at because I have a lot of kids. I know when I do the history club every year, some little kid would ask me, you didn't say anything about Freddie's hole.
I have never actually heard about Freddie's hole. I do remember, my son obviously went to Scott2ube. I remember helping Mr. Rick at recess. That was always a big deal. That was something that
I have kids tell me that now. They said, Rick, I remember my big thing was helping you after lunch.
Yes.
Got to run the big sweeper, helped you after lunch.
Oh, yeah.
I have kids, I'll come over here. And kids will say, oh, Rick, that was my favorite part of Highland Street.
Yeah.
And but about 20 years ago, we had a kid that gave it that name, which was Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger.
Okay.
That's where the name came from. Because he said, this looks like where Freddy Krueger would live.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me.
That's how Freddie's hole got there.
Even Mr. Carter called it that. Even Mr. Carter would say, take this down to Freddie's hole, throw it in there. So that's how it got that name.
Yeah. Well, how cool. So now obviously you've seen a lot of things happen, the infrastructure with technology and those sorts of things that come in an older building like that. What were the challenges of trying to, get all that stuff in there inside the infrastructure that was already set?
Well, of course, first of all, there was no computers. There wasn't even one. There wasn't one in the office then. So that meant a lot of file cabinets.
Okay.
Because you had to keep every kid on file. And we had a row of file cabinets this long, and they all weighed a ton. They were all full of paperwork that now's all kept in a little computer. Back at that time. So anytime you waxed the floors or did any work or moved anything, you had to move all those big file cabinets, put it back in order, and all that. But and then I remember when the very first computer came. We didn't have it. It went in the office there. Mr. Carter wasn't a big computer lover either. And then they slowly started. We got a couple in the library, and then of course now we have a computer lab almost. The rooms are all full. Well, the kids take them home with them. They've all got. It just went from. And of course, another thing that caused was, and you probably have it over here too, power problems. Because when that building was built, the electricity was fine, and you had plenty of power. You added all these computers to it. All new kitchen equipment, updated kitchen equipment, and of course we've kind of got it straightened out now. But a lot of times during the day, I would get Rick, our power's out. I'd have to go to the breaker and flip the breaker, and but now they've kind of done some of that where we don't have. We still have a small problem with it, but nothing like it used to be at first.
So obviously, Highland Street's Scott2ube Elementary is kind of landlocked, and it just has a limited amount of space there.
Yeah.
Just kind of casting out and thinking about how long does Scott2ube Elementary stay there? Is it something where you could see decades of that still being there, or?
Of course, the school's got a lot of invested there, and the building is still nice. I mean, you can go inside, the building is still nice. And a few years ago, when they were talking about moving the office down to where it is now, it used to be up on the second floor. They moved the office down there, took over 2 classrooms, made it an office area. I went to the board meeting and was just there as a spectator, and they had the architects there because they were talking about bringing the office down, which was a small project compared to what we've done in the past. And the architect said, "Is there anybody here that could kind of tell us what the building used to look like? We'd like to have them. We're going over for a walkthrough. All the board members and Margaret can move for a walkthrough." And they said, "Well, Rick's about as good as any." So they asked me, said, "Would you come like tomorrow night and walk through with us?" And I said, "Yes, no problem." So I went, and as we walked around, I kind of stayed in the back. Me and the architect were kind of bringing up the rear, and we got to talking. Scott2ube was his name, and in each section of the building, as they built it, there's a plaque. Like there's one that says this was built in 1937. You can go over to the first grade side, and there's 2 or 3 plaques that it lists all the construction company and the subcontractors and everything, and the school board members at that time in 1960, and the architects and all that are listed on plaques there in the first grade hallway. Then you go over in the other side, right there by the office in the third grade wing is the plaques for that remodel. It's got all the contractors and the school board members' names and everything on it at that time. But as we walked around, he told me, he looked at all those plaques. And he said, "Rick, if you look at these plaques, there's just around 20 years difference between each one." Okay. You know, he said it was 37 was your first one. Then you went over to 60. Then he said you go over to 85. He said it's not exactly 20, but because he said what I'm getting at is here, about every 20 years, you're going to have to do some renovation. Okay. And he said you can just see that in these plaques. These plaques are all around 20 years difference. And he said you're there again. You know, it's there again. And so, but, and I never really thought of that. But he said, "You can look at these plaques and tell that, you know, it's time to redo your electricity. You're moving the office." He said it's time to update things. About every 20 years you have to, you know, to do that.
Now, as a history geek, you may not know the answer to this, but as a history geek, you say 1937. Obviously, the country's in the middle of the Great Depression. Was there any of those New Deal programs involved in making Highland? Or
you know, I like you said, that's a little bit beyond me, but I wouldn't doubt it a bit because there was a lot of that going on at that time. You know, we were trying to come out of the Depression, and the government was trying to help out in any way they could. And I've heard that before, where, you know, if they help with building new schools and stuff like that. But now, you know, when I went to school there, and when I first went to work there in the 80s, of course, when I went to school, there was no air conditioning at all. You pull those old big windows down, right over the top right here, you had a giant Westinghouse fans, Westinghouse on the front, and it oscillated back and forth, and that's all you had. And of course, you go out on the playground, hot and sweaty, and come back in, that's all you had. The teacher would give you a few minutes. Everybody sit in your seat here, just sit back and relax, and we'll all cool off, you know. And
I can imagine in the 5th and 6th grade wing, it probably got a little smelly.
Oh,
too,
yeah,
right?
yeah, they would get a little ripe in there once in a while, yeah. Everybody was all sweaty. Then when I went in 85, we had window units in all the rooms. You had 2 little window units in each room. And it helped, but it was nothing like central air. And but then when we remodeled in 85, of course, all those went out, and we put in central air.
Well, Mr. Robinson, thank you so much. I tell you what, I've learned a ton. That's a lot of fun.
I appreciate you guys having me, and I was glad to do it. And I sent a letter out the other day for my retirement. Chris has been after me, and I started to just write December 31st is my last day, you know, and sign it. You know, he said, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. You know, and I sat back and I got to thinking, it's been a nice ride. And I, you know, if I had a time machine, I'd set it for December 1985, and I'd do it all over again. And I've met the nicest people. I've met thousands of people, and kids and adults that I could. And I've got enough stories to tell forever, you know, and memories, and I wouldn't change a thing. If I had to do all over, I'd do it again. I'd change. I can't think of anything I would change. It's been a good 35 years.
Well, fantastic. Okay. We thank you. I know that my wife will definitely miss you over there at Scottsburg Elementary, but going to be a new school board member in January, so still going to be connected to the school. So we're looking.
You know, that did have something to do with it. There's 2 or 3 things. I lost a brother a little over a year ago, and he always wanted me to run. When he says, "You need to run for school," and he passed away, and I kind of had that in the back of my mind, and And I just wasn't ready to leave yet. You know, I work a lot of ball games. I sell tickets to a lot of ball games, and I enjoy that. And I just wasn't quite ready to go home and call it quits yet. And I'm not saying running for school board was the way to do it. Maybe I should have worked a while longer, but I thought, you know,
let's give it till February to start with that, right?
I thought, you know, I'm still connected, and I just wasn't quite ready to give it all up. But like I said, when I sit back and think about it, and all the nice people I met, and I can sit underneath a tree and tell kids stories for all day long. I've got a lot of good memories.
1985 to 2020, thousands and thousands of kids, hundreds of teachers, and Rick's been there. So we appreciate you sitting down with us.
I was kind of proud of the fact too that I stayed at one building.
Yeah.
And nothing against any other custodian, but a lot of them have transferred. I've been in one spot for 35 years. And see, I went to school there. I mean, I've got over 40 years at Highland Elementary. I mean, it was a big part of my life. It really was. Over 40 years of my life was spent at Highland Elementary School, Scott2ube Elementary. And so it's always have a special spot for me. I told Mr. Marsh that I'll come over to see you guys, and or if you call me, and I'll come over, and we'll eat lunch. And because I said this has been a big part of my life, and I just don't want to just give it up, you know.
So now, sometime between now and the 31st, though, I'm showing up. I want to see Freddie's hole.
All right.
Before you go, I want to see Freddie's hole. Maybe take my camera phone and we can zoom in and add a little something in there.
After you get there, you'll be disappointed. It's not real exciting or anything, unless maybe you're in the second grade. It'd be exciting.
Yeah.
But thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much, and thanks a lot. Like I said, it's been a good 35 years, and I wouldn't change a thing. And thanks everybody very much.